Look at the density of a modern rainforest. Millions of highly specialized species share space, nutrients, and sunlight in a tightly packed biological network. But if we rewind 4.54 billion years to the Hadean Eon, there is no biology. The Earth is a toxic sphere of molten rock, constantly bombarded by incoming asteroids. That period of intense violence culminated in a massive astronomical collision. A Mars-sized planet named Theia slammed directly into the early Earth. Billions of tons of debris from that impact were ejected into space, where they eventually coalesced into orbit. That scattered wreckage formed our moon. Over the following millions of years, the Earth's surface slowly cooled. The molten crust solidified into rock, allowing thick atmospheric water vapor to finally condense and rain down, forming a global superocean. This sequence of extreme planetary trauma and cooling was the required physical setup. Without the collisions and the resulting global ocean, there would be no canvas to host biological life. At the bottom of that dark superocean, chemical-rich gases spewed from volcanic hydrothermal vents. The intense temperature contrast between the boiling volcanic gas and the freezing ocean water created an energy gradient, a natural chemical battery that drove the very first metabolic reactions. Down in those vents, simple strings of RNA acquired the ability to copy themselves. This chemical self-replication marks the last universal common ancestor, or LUCA. These initial lifeforms were trapped. They existed solely as single cells, dependent on the localized heat of the deep-sea vents. Expanding out into the wider ocean required a new way to process energy. Around 3.5 billion years ago, a group of organisms called cyanobacteria developed a method to harvest energy directly from sunlight. They invented photosynthesis. There was a lethal catch to this process. Photosynthesis produced oxygen as a waste product. For the anaerobic organisms that made up the entire early biosphere, oxygen was highly toxic. This chart maps atmospheric oxygen levels over Earth's history. Notice the long, flat baseline near zero. Then, roughly 2.4 billion years ago, the accumulated oxygen saturated the oceans and flooded into the atmosphere, causing this massive vertical spike known as the Great Oxygenation Event. This rapid atmospheric change nearly sterilized the planet. Life was forced into a severe evolutionary bottleneck, where it had to adapt to the poison or die. Some single-celled organisms survived by swallowing smaller oxygen-consuming bacteria without digesting them. Through a process called symbiogenesis, these internal guests became mitochondria, giving rise to eukaryotes, which weaponized oxygen to generate massive amounts of cellular energy. As a cell grows, internal volume expands faster than surface area, leaving it unable to absorb enough nutrients. Eukaryotes solved this by grouping together. Using mitochondria energy to form a cluster of specialized cells increased overall size while preserving the surface area ratio required to eat. In surviving the Great Oxygenation Event, organisms inadvertently secured the energy and physical architecture necessary to build large, complex animal bodies. Jump forward to 542 million years ago. As multicellular organisms grew larger, some found a highly efficient energy source. They began hunting and eating other organisms. Predation triggered a massive evolutionary arms race known as the Cambrian Explosion. Prey rapidly evolved hard shells and carapaces to deflect attacks, while predators developed bilateral symmetry to swim faster and track targets. The oceans quickly became crowded with specialized competitors. To escape the density of marine predators, life began spilling onto the barren, rocky continents. Plants arrived first, using their roots to physically break down rock into nutrient-rich soil. Arthropods quickly followed to feed on the vegetation, establishing new terrestrial food webs that drew amphibians and eventually reptiles out of the water. The intense ecological pressure of the oceans drove life outward, forcing organisms to actively engineer Earth's sterile rock into a habitable terrestrial biosphere. Biological expansion on Earth has never been a smooth curve. The geological record reveals 5 major mass extinction events that abruptly wiped out vast percentages of all living species. The most recognized of these resets hit 65 million years ago. A massive asteroid impact triggered a global winter. and the cold-blooded dinosaurs that had dominated the land for over 100 million years vanished entirely. The sudden removal of the apex predators cleared the global ecosystem. Vast food and territory resources were suddenly left undefended, launching the Cenozoic era. Small, warm-blooded mammals diversified rapidly to fill those ecological gaps. Over tens of millions of years, they adapted to dense forests and savannas, eventually producing the human genus roughly 2.3 million years ago. The modern natural world is the surviving remnant of a 4.5 billion-year chain reaction. Every species alive today was forged by extreme atmospheric poisoning, violent planetary collisions, and endless predatory pressure.